Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving right into the fascinating and, honestly, sometimes totally surprising science behind why we feel lonely. And to really wrap our heads around this, we're going to look at a pretty wild contrast. Think about it. The daily life of a modern city dweller compared to the experience of an Apollo astronaut just floating out there in the vastness of space. So, let's kick things off by unpacking a really crucial question. Are you alone or are you lonely? Now, you might be thinking, aren't those the same thing? But as we're going to see throughout this explainer, these two concepts are fundamentally different. We mix them up all the time in everyday conversation, but scientifically, totally different ballgames. Section 1. Meet Michael, the urban paradox. To really ground this idea, let's introduce Michael. He fits the exact demographic you'd probably see swiping on dating apps right now. He's 31 years old, and he goes about his days surrounded by literally millions of people. Think about it, on the subway, on crowded sidewalks, in a massive office building. But here's the catch. Despite being physically surrounded by a sea of humanity all day long, he is profoundly, deeply lonely. And the contrast between his external success and his internal reality is just stark. I mean, he went to college, he earns a solid $60,000 a year. On paper, by pretty much all societal metrics, the guy is doing great. But on the inside, he's experiencing this heavy, painful sense of isolation. So you gotta wonder, why is he feeling this way? Well, this beautifully illustrates a myth we absolutely need to bust right off the bat. Choosing to be alone, actually seeking out solitude, can be an incredibly healthy thing. It fuels your creativity, it actually improves your attention span, and it's an empowering choice. But being lonely, that is completely different. That's an involuntary craving for company. It's marked by real feelings of sadness and isolation. See, Michael isn't just alone, he's lonely.
Section 2, the genetics of loneliness.
Okay, this is where the science gets super fascinating. Michael's loneliness isn't necessarily some kind of personal failure. It might actually be hardwired directly into his DNA. We're talking about a specific variant of the serotonin transporter gene. Recent studies are showing that people who have this exact genetic marker are quite literally predisposed to feel a heightened sense of loneliness. It acts almost like an intense biological hunger for company. So if Michael has this marker, he's just going to feel significantly lonelier than someone else standing right next to him in that exact same crowded room. Crazy, right? And that brings up a pretty wild thought. If Michael feels this intensely lonely right in the middle of a bustling city, you really have to ask yourself, who is the most physically isolated human in history? And more importantly, how did that extreme isolation actually make them feel? Section 3. The isolated astronaut. So let's pivot to the ultimate extreme counterexample, Apollo 15 pilot Al Worden. To even begin to understand his level of isolation, just consider this staggering number: 3,600 kilometers. While his colleagues Dave Scott and Jim Irwin were literally driving their moon buggy around the lunar surface, Al Worden was up there orbiting the moon completely alone. At times, he was an incredible 3,600 kilometers away from the only other human beings anywhere near him. And we're not talking about a quick afternoon trip either. He spent 3 entire days completely alone in orbit, hundreds of thousands of kilometers from home. And because of the nature of his orbit, he was often completely cut off, meaning zero contact with mission control down on Earth. But here's the kicker. When talking about this later, Al Worden said something amazing. He said, "There's a thing about being alone, and there's a thing about being lonely. I was alone, but I was not lonely. On the backside of the moon, I didn't even have to talk to Houston, and that was the best part of the flight." Let that sink in. The crucial point here is that absolute, extreme physical isolation simply does not guarantee loneliness. Al actually thrived in it. He deeply enjoyed the profound solitude of deep space. Section 4. Biology's alarm bell. All right, bringing this back down to Earth, we have to look at the darker side of this equation. Remaining physically isolated for long periods carries severe biological consequences. And that's true regardless of whether you're someone who enjoys it, like Al, or someone who struggles with it, like Michael. The research shows that actual social isolation increases a person's likelihood of death by a massive 26% compared to people who are socially connected. A 26% spike. And honestly, the most shocking part? That spike happens even if the isolated person doesn't consciously consider themselves lonely. The physical damage to the body happens anyway. So why exactly is the physical risk so high? Well, it's because humans are, at our absolute core, a social species. We depend on each other literally from the moment we are born. When you're isolated, you lose those basic communal safety nets. Think about it. There's no one around to give you a quick piece of advice. There's a lack of that gentle encouragement to go see a doctor when you're just feeling a bit off. And critically, there's absolutely zero immediate help when things go suddenly wrong.
Section 5. Craving connection. And this brings us right to the why. Why does that painful feeling of loneliness even exist in our bodies in the first place? Listen, it is not a weakness. It is a highly evolved survival mechanism, specifically designed to keep us alive. In fact, it functions exactly like hunger. Think about physical hunger. It drives a biological yearning for food so you don't starve to death, right? Well, loneliness drives a biological yearning for social connection so you don't lose your tribe and your safety net. It acts as an internal alarm bell, practically screaming at us to seek out the absolute necessity of human connection.
So, the big question, what can we actually do about it? Well, if you ever find yourself struggling like Michael, the research suggests a simple but honestly really fascinating tool. Just tapping into a healthy dose of nostalgia can actually help counteract those difficult, lonely feelings. Simply taking the time to remember past connections and fond memories actually helps quiet down that loud biological alarm bell ringing in your brain. Ultimately, the science shows us that surrounding yourself with others is exactly what keeps you orbiting the sun for many, many years to come. Whether you're the kind of person who enjoys solitude like an astronaut, or you desperately crave community in a bustling city, connection is biologically essential. So, I want to leave you with this final, vital thought to reflect on today. Take a look around your life right now. Really look. Who is in your orbit?